Good evening, my sisters and my brothers. And I begin with my familiar biblical greeting and salutation to you, which is this: from the rising of the sun until the going down of the same, the Lord's name is to be praised, which means that we praise our God all day long, all night long. Uh, he is worthy to be praised. Thank you for joining us tonight on this Tuesday night for Tuesday evening Bible study. I greet you in the name that is above every name on this uh, windy evening. We thank God for life and for health and for strength. Thank you for joining us. Certainly, we want to keep uh, in prayer those who stand in the need of prayer. And certainly want to keep Sister MAPSON in prayer, who's still struggling with the challenge of recovery from knee replacement. Thank you for tuning in. Sister Claudette Robinson is viewing us on this evening, as she does every Tuesday and also Sunday for worship, and all of you have been very faithful, not only members of Monumental, but very dear friends and extended church family, uh, joining us tonight from near and from far. Um, I came across a very, I think, a very moving thought, and I want to read it for us tonight. It was written by Reverend Charles Spurgeon. Charles Haddon Spurgeon was an English preacher of the 19th century. He died at age 58, uh, but during his productive life, he was without a doubt the most popular preacher on the other side of the Atlantic. Pastored Metropolitan Tabernacle Baptist Church in London for 40 some years. This is what he says: there are times when solitude is better than society, and silence is wiser than speech. We should be better Christians if we were more alone, waiting upon God and gathering through meditation on His Word spiritual strength for labor in His service. We ought to muse upon the things of God, because we thus get the real nutriment out of them. Why is it, he says, that some Christians, although they hear many sermons, make but slow advances in the divine life? Because they neglect their closets and do not thoughtfully meditate on God's word. They love the wheat, but they do not grind it. They would have the corn, but they will not go forth into the fields to gather it. The fruit hangs upon the tree, but they will not pluck it. The water flows at their feet, but they will not stoop to drink it. From such folly, deliver us, O Lord. What a uh, powerful quote from one of the giants in the preaching ministry, Charles Haddon Spurgeon. I want to remind us of to follow us, that remind you rather to follow us on our social media platforms such as Facebook, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also to remind you of the three ways to give, either online, four ways actually: text to give, or you can mail in your offerings or bring them to the church office. Let us not forget throwback, uh, not this week, but let us not forget Digging Deeper with Dr. Q, uh, weekly Sunday evenings at 7 o'clock, where you will enjoy and benefit from a conversation concerning the morning's sermon. I want to encourage those who have not gotten the first vaccine to get it, but also encourage those who are eligible for the booster, which is now available uh, through Moderna and Pfizer, as well as J&J, to get your booster shot, since we're coming upon what could be another challenging season, as winter will be soon upon us. But I want to also remind us of the very special event that is going to take place this coming Sunday afternoon at historic Eden Cemetery. And it's not just Eden Cemetery, the name is Historic Eden Cemetery because some of the remains of some bright lights among African Americans are interred in that sacred place. And you may not know that Eden Cemetery was formed as a place to reinter uh, African Americans who originally were buried in the city of Philadelphia. And when the city decided they wanted the land to do something for the sake of progress, they had those remains dug up and removed to Eden Cemetery. And so Eden Cemetery was designed for that purpose. And the neighbors of Eden Cemetery, those persons who lived in the area, didn't want a black cemetery in Collingdale, and so they they barred the entrance of the cemetery to keep burials from taking place. And so the first burial that took place there, I think around in 1902, was in the middle of the night. After the protesters had gone home, is when they had to bury the uh, first person. I think it's such a powerful story of perseverance on the part of African Americans. But anyway, on this coming Sunday, we will gather at Eden Cemetery to dedicate and unveil this beautiful memorial. You must see it. A memorial for those persons who were originally buried in the African Friends to Harmony burial ground located then at 41st and Chestnut Street. And the three persons who bought the land for that burial ground, two of them were members of Monumental. This happened in 1826, the year of our founding. And the third person, was a member of the Mount Pisgah AME Church, which at that time was located in that same area. These three black men, um, uh, through great sacrifice and in a hostile environment, bought here black people buying land in Philadelphia in 1826 to give African Americans in that community a decent Christian burial. Um, it was discovered 3 years ago uh, that the parking lot uh, was over that burial ground, and the parking lot owned by the University of Pennsylvania, who came to our two churches, and together we decided we didn't want the remains to remain under some asphalt, uh, and so we authorized Penn to have the remains dug up and reinterred at Eden Cemetery, and that ceremony took place it was in the spring of 2020 of last year. So we're going back on this coming Sunday to finish the ceremony and to dedicate the monument. I've asked that if there are members, and this is historic for us as a congregation, and I want you to be a part of it. members of Mount Pisgah, as well as members of Monumental. We ask that you would call in to the church office or email the church office just so we can get an idea, uh, that we can let the cemetery know approximately how many people we think uh, will be there. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be a ceremony that will last no longer than an hour and 15 minutes. Both pastors will bring remarks as well as representatives from the University of Pennsylvania. We hope to have media coverage. Uh, but this is an event that we certainly want you to share with us. That's this coming Sunday at 3 p.m. sharp at the historic Eden Cemetery in Collingdale, right outside of the city of Philadelphia. Now we're going to continue to this evening in our study of the book of Revelation. Um, a book of and again, I want to stress it every chance I get. Um, it is not a book about just about punishment. It is not just a book about judgment. Not just a book about scary things. Um, it is a book of encouragement, and through it, uh, the Lord of the church, who is Jesus Christ, is encouraging uh, the faithful in times of great peril, but also times of great promise. And so the peril at the time was the intimidation of the Roman Empire. Roman Empire um, um, ordered that everyone would bow down to Caesar. Christians are saying we can't do that because we only bow down to Christ. And under threat of violence and often the loss of life, these Christians are trying to hold on and hold out in a very difficult time and in a very hostile environment. We will never know what it was like then to have to claim Christ and the lordship of Christ in such a hostile environment. And so Christ is sending this message, the message of revelation, to the seven churches and to other Christians who were living at the time, urging them to hold out during a time of great peril, and saying to them that it's not going to be easy. Um, it may get worse before it gets better. But if you hold out to the end, you will wear a crown of life. The reward is at the end. Um, Sometimes we want the reward without the suffering, or we want the reward before the suffering, and and then no suffering. But Christ promises his faithful followers that if you hold out, if you refuse to compromise, uh, then at the end there will be victory. And so the book of Revelation is about the perils of being uh, a Christian during this time, but also offers the promise of victory in the end. And so here they are. Here are these Christians reading these words of hope and assurance coming from the Lord himself, but given to us through uh, the faithful recording of a preacher evangelist by the name of John, who is on an island called Patmos, being put there because of bearing witness to the gospel of his Lord. And so we are in chapter 15. If you will turn with me to that chapter as we pick up from where we left off on last week. One of the reoccurring themes in the book of Revelation, book of prophecy of Revelation, is music, and I've stressed that all along. Revelation is full of songs, full of singing, full of music. Um, I've said from the pulpit before that if if you don't want to worship down here, you really don't want to go to heaven, because that's all we're going to do when we get to heaven is worship God. This book of Revelation is a worship book from beginning to end. And I went through briefly before we started tonight, just to, and you may want to get a pen or pencil and paper and just jot down these passages, which I will not read, but I hope that you will take the time and go back. These are songs, all of them in the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 4, verse 8 following, meaning verse 8 and verses following verse 8. Revelation chapter 4, verse 10 and following. Chapter 5, verse 9 and following. Chapter 12 following of that same chapter, chapter 5. Verse 13 of chapter 5 and following. Chapter 7, verse 10 and following. And then verse 11 and following of chapter 7. And then which leads us to chapter 15, where we find some more singing. Let me run through them one more time. The benefit of this being recorded, of course, is you can play it back yourself. But chapter 4, verse 8 and following, verse 10 and following, chapter 5, verse 9 and following, verse 12 and following, verse 13 and following, chapter 7, verse 10 and following, and verse 11 and following, and chapter 15, where we find ourselves this evening. So let's look at two songs. Two songs. One is called the Song of Moses, and the other is called the Song of the Lamb. What a contrast! The Song of Moses and the Song of the Lamb. Chapter 15, verse 2. Let's start at verse 1. I saw there again. um, we keep seeing, I saw, I heard a voice, I saw, I turned, I looked, I saw in heaven another great and marvelous sight, 7 angels with the 7 last plagues. And we know what the number 7 means. Last, because with them God's wrath is completed. There comes a point when God's wrath is ended, and that's good news, because we couldn't stand God's wrath to last forever. There's a expiration date on his on God's wrath. Again, a reminder of the journey of the children of Israel. And you recall in the Old Testament how they kept disobeying God, asking for forgiveness. Then they would disobey God again and chase after idols, and then they would come running back to God for forgiveness again, and this just on and back and forth, and then finally God had enough, and God did not punish them, but God turned them over into the hands of their enemies and allowed their enemies to punish them. You see, and but then there was a point where the prophet says, "Okay, your punishment is not going to last forever. Their punishment is going to last for 70 years. And you recall that they were many of them were taken into captivity in Babylon, but they were there for 70 years, and then they returned and rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem and restored their temple. And so we have the same thing here, that God's wrath does not last forever. At some point, God's wrath is complete. And I saw what looked like a sea of glass mixed with fire, and standing before the sea, those who had been victorious. Now, looked like a sea of glass, and I'm gonna talk about the word "looked like" at a later time, but looked like a sea of glass mixed with fire, and standing beside the sea, those who had been victorious over the beast and his image. The beast doesn't win. The lamb wins. The beast reigns for a season. The beast is allowed to create havoc, and to do the works of evil and wickedness, but only for a season. And again, the good news is trouble don't last always. I mean that uh, that uh, black church saying "trouble don't last always" is real. It lasts, but it does not last always. So here we have the victory of those who who were not caught up with the beast, but who remained faithful to God, victorious over the beast and his image, and over the number of his name. They held harps. Here comes the singing, given to them by God. God is giving them their instruments, and they sang the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. Two songs. And so the question is then, because we're gonna see what the song of the Lamb is. It is printed here, the song of the Lamb that they sang. But what is the song of Moses? And for that we turn to the Old Testament. So much again of Revelation hinges on and is reflected in and is influenced by the Old Testament. I mean, it's I've said that over and over again, because it is so true. Um, Revelation would be almost an empty prophecy without references to the Old Testament. See, and so here again we are we're forced to go backward into the Old Testament and see what this Song of Moses entails. The book of Exodus. And in the 15th chapter of Exodus is where we find the Song of Moses. Now, I don't want to begin with the 15th chapter, verse 1. Let's take it back to verse 29 of the 14th chapter. And remember, it's very important. Context is always important when we try to read and study and understand the scripture. We make a grave mistake when, and people do this all the time. Uh, whatever they believe, they go to the Bible to make the Bible affirm and prove what they believe. See, and the way to do that is by taking verses out of context without understanding the setting that the verse is in. And so we want to be sure, as we start with chapter 15, that we understand the context. Now, we know that the children of Israel had just they were on their way out of Egyptian bondage, and we know the story of the how they got to the Red Sea and didn't know what to do, and by that time Pharaoh changed his mind and said, "I'm not letting them go," and he sent his army after them to bring them back, and there was nowhere for the Israelites to go. The sea was in front of them. Uh, Pharaoh's army was coming up from the rear. There were mountains on either side. And that is when God opens up the waters of the Red Sea, and the Israelites cross on dry ground, remember, on dry ground. Now, as they're crossing on dry ground, Pharaoh's army thinks it can do the same thing. But when Pharaoh's army started marching through the riverbed, the waters overtook them, and the same path that was salvation and deliverance for God's people was drowning in death for God's enemies. Isn't that's God for you? That's the way that God works. Now, so when we get to verse 29, we pick up this story. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, which is what I just said, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And this is the other part. And Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant, because remember, it was Moses who was their leader and brought them across. I say also, rarely does God do great things without a leader. You know, think about the fact God, in all the years that Israel was in bondage, God never came down himself to save them. But what did God do? God waited for the right moment and for the right person. And that person was Moses. Moses was their deliverer, even though Moses was the vehicle of God's grace and God's mercy. So now we move into chapter 15, which contains the Song of Moses. As we shall see, it is also the Song of Miriam. It's the song of Moses and Miriam. Miriam was Moses' sister, and following the song that is led by Moses, Miriam uh, uh, steps up and sings another part of the song, as we shall see. But when Revelation speaks of the two songs, the Song of Moses and the Song of the Lamb, the reference is to this Song of Moses found in Exodus chapter 15. Let's read just a little bit of it, because um, the significance, I think, is going to be very apparent as we begin reading it. Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. See, they did not sing to themselves. They did not sing for their own entertainment. They did not sing to be applauded. Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. And I think right there, I mean, when we talk about worship, who are we singing to? And what are we singing for? See, are we singing for our glory, or to be seen, or to be heard, to display our voice? Um, are we singing to the Lord? Because I think we can tell the difference in worship today, especially in worship that many times in our churches is no more than just entertainment. It's more about the singer than about God. And so we can learn so many lessons by just reading the song of Moses. Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord, and this is the song. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. Now, what is that referring to? It's referring to the Egyptian army. You know, Israelites had no chariots and horses. They had oxen and chickens and you know they came out of Egypt on foot. You know, the Egyptians had the horsepower and the chariots. I mean, just think about people on foot, just a ragtag bunch of slaves, ex-slaves now, and a mighty army pursuing them. And so when Moses is leading the people in singing, the horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. Wow, what a powerful picture. You because you can picture. Now I don't usually I take what do you call it? Um, um, Biblical movies with a grain of salt, because it's you know they don't they don't portray they're not true to and faithful to the biblical narrative. I mean, if you know the Bible and you watch the Ten Commandments, it's a lot of that's not the same. Um, uh, because it's Hollywood, and for a Hollywood movie to be successful, what do you need? You need violence, you need romance, and you need a plot. So there you go. But I said that to say that this movie, The Ten Commandments, which comes on every uh, probably Good Friday or the Saturday before Easter. Uh, I watch it. I like to watch all of that. That's cinema, and especially with the crossing of the Red Sea. Hollywood. They got it right. They really tried to simulate what it must have been like. And you could, if when you're watching the movie, you could see the waters uh, back up on either side, and so there's a clear path down the center, and here the Moses and the Israelites walking through this clear path, this dry ground, and the waters are still up like a wall on each side of water. And then once the Israelites get through the riverbed to the other shore, then the movie shows Pharaoh's army going into that same riverbed, and it's still dry. See, because had it not been dry, Pharaoh's army never would have tried to go across. But it was dry, and they figured, well, if the Israelites went through, so can we. And bad mistake, because as they're in the middle of that uh, uh, tunnel, so to speak, trying to cross to the other side, is when the waters come back over. I had a this listen. This was so many years ago. I can't remember, but uh, I was in California uh, once, and I went to how you have these Hollywood tours, and I toured the set where the movie was filmed, and you were in a tram, I think they call it, going around the set, and they took us to where the scene where the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, and the tram actually went down. The same thing happened. They had the waters pushed up on each side, and then we going through, and then so to simulate that. But anyway, that's I'm going off here, but just think about, though, forget Hollywood and just think about a mighty God who can do that and doesn't need Hollywood. God doesn't need actors, Charlton Heston and the rest and the rest of them. But here it is. Here it is. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. So the Lord is three things, right? My strength, my song, and my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will extol him. So if we just illuminate, just pick apart this song, I mean, there's so much in it. The Lord is my strength and my song. Again, the song is and here again, my critique of uh, of um, of our culture, I guess. The the culture we live in celebrates self. Mu- Singers and musicians celebrate self and their own gifts, and of course, many of them have tremendous gifts. But here is a song that is not about self. It is not about Israel makes no claim at all to have done anything. Israel is not patting itself on the back and saying we did it. It He is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. Why? Because of what he just did. He parted the waters we didn't do that. Warner Brothers didn't do that. Didn't do that. God did that. And this song then is a celebration of who God is. The Lord, verse 3, the Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's, and then he tells the story of what just happened. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he hurled into the sea. The best of Pharaoh's officers are drowned in the Red Sea. Because remember now, Pharaoh didn't go after them. He sent his army. You know, I heard once somebody say that Pharaoh's army got drowned, but Pharaoh didn't. Pharaoh's still alive. But nonetheless, I mean, Pharaoh, the best of his warriors, his officers, his whatever the ranks are. I know nothing about military rank, but his highest officers were hurled into the sea. The best of Pharaoh's officers are drowned in the Red Sea. The deep waters have covered them. They sank to the depth like a stone. My God. And well, if you've ever taken a stone and tossed it into the water, into an ocean or to a lake, what does it do? Just plop. And that's what Moses is saying God did to their enemies. He took them and they sank to the depths like a stone. See, and I wanted to return to words like Like, because we're going to see that word several times during the song, at least one, two, maybe three times or more. Like something does not mean it is that something. It's a way of describing what it is like. It's called a simile, uh, and a simile. Trying to pronounce it. A simile is a Latin word that means like unto. See, and so here we have, they sank to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, was majestic in power. So it's a celebration of what? The power of God. Look at words like, Lord is my strength, my song. He's become my salvation. And now we're talking about the Lord's is majestic in power. I mean, look at all of these. I tell you, in a world where we feel sometimes so powerless. I mean, um, and 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 so lacking in control. One of the tragedies of this pandemic is what it has done to people's minds and minds and emotions, uh, and the feeling of a loss of control. Can't control the pandemic. Can't control where I go. Um, just so many things that it seems like we've lost control of, which which can have a very very much negative effect on us as human beings, especially the disruption that has taken place over the past several months. And then you have the political intrigue, and you have the racial unrest, and you have economic unrest, and you've got the SEPTA may go on strike. I mean, it just everything. Just there's always something. It's like road repair. You know, the the roads are always being repaired. Always. I mean, 95 is always being repaired. The streets are always, you know, all around me. They're digging up streets, the other side of that is, though, we complain about that, but we do want better streets and sewer lines and gas lines and all of that. I understand that. That's what we want. That we should have that. So we got to deal with that inconvenience. But my point is simply the disruptions of life, the detours that we have to take, the way the pandemic and other pandemics have uh, um, just disrupted our neat little worlds that we just used to, uh, a routine, and we were set in that routine, and church and everything else. We did what we did every day, and we went to work every day, or unless you're retired, we went to church on Sundays. I went to the grocery stores. There was no fear and anxiety associated with just living like it is today for so many people. And into this world that seems to have stripped us of control and power, here we have a God who is majestic in power. So now, if I don't have the power, but God has, and I belong to God, then don't I also have the power? And since God is God now, and God is in control, and God made the world and everything in it, um, it challenges us, I think, to really think about who God is, who this God is that we serve, that we claim to serve, a God who is our strength. Verse 2, our song. And we all need a song, my God. He's become our salvation. Your right hand, O Lord, was majestic in just your right hand. You only need the left hand. You can get in the ring and just use your right hand and knock your opponent out. See, your right hand, O Lord, shattered the enemy. I'm in verse 5. In the greatness of your majesty, here's another word. So we got what? Let's put the words. Let's write them down. You got strength. Talking about God, not us. And this is the song that Moses and the people are singing. Strength, my song, my salvation, my power, greatness, and majesty. What else do we need? And who would not serve a God like that? Let's go on. In the greatness of your majesty, you threw down those who opposed you. In the greatness of your majesty, this is the song. This is the song of Moses. In the greatness of your majesty, you threw down those who opposed you. Notice not just those who opposed the Israelites. When you oppose the Israelites, you're opposing God. Why is that? Because the Israelites belong to God. The Israelites are God's people, God's chosen people. If we belong to God, then the enemy is not just our enemy, it's God's enemy. See, in the greatness of your majesty, you threw down those who oppose you, referring to who? The Egyptians. You unleashed your burning anger. It consumed them like stubble. So you could just imagine the image of an angry God, whose anger like fire just um, consumes the enemy. And here's one I like, this verse here. By the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The surging waters stood firm. Here goes the word again, like a wall. And remember, we said earlier that you could imagine the waters standing up on either side like two walls made of water, just waiting for God's command, to close in. And all of this is described so vividly and colorfully here. The blast of your nostrils. I mean, the the the, the wonderful thing, the beauty of the Bible is the way God is described. And the fact of the matter is that, and we know that God is what? God is spirit. God is a spirit. God is spirit, right? Spirit has no eyes and no ears. Spirit can't walk or talk. Spirit has no nostrils, right? But the beauty of the Bible is the way in which it describes God in such a way that we can almost grab hold of God. I say almost, because of the way God is described. The writers use human characteristics to describe the divine. See, and so again, God does not have human features, but God is described with human features because that's the only way we can understand God. See, the, we can only understand God through the categories that that we experience and that we know. We know what eyes are. We have eyes and a mouth and hands. So when it says his right hand, well, God, that's a way to describe God. He holds my hand. Well, spirits can't hold a hand because spirits don't have hands, but it's a human way of describing the nature of God and what God does for us. Holds our hand, and we say guides our feet, and all of that. And so when we talk about God sees, right? Spirits can't see, but 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 humans see. So we have an understanding of sight because we experience sight ourselves. And so we say that God sees. We say it all the time. God sees what we do. God hears what we say. God speaks. Uh, the writer of Genesis describes God walking in the cool of the garden. My God, that's wonderful. That's walking in the cool of the garden. Because how else could I understand God if I don't understand God walking in the cool of the garden? See, but this by the blast of your nostrils. See, in other words, just God breathing out through his nostrils. Listen to this. Was enough to make the waters part. So God, I mean, listen, I want to jump up out of my seat. Just think about a God who can do that. With the blast of your nostrils, by the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The surging water stood firm like a wall. The deep congealed in the heart of the sea. A sea doesn't have a heart, but we have hearts. So we understand that language and it becomes real. It lives. See, I know a preacher who, when another preacher is preaching, he says, and we preachers say a whole lot of things, doing a sermon as you do. Uh, and this preacher, when he's listened to a sermon, he'd always say, "Make it live, make it live." Dr. Martin Luther King Sr. used to say, "Make it plain, make it plain." But this lives. See, this whole picture of God and who God is and the power of God, the majesty of God, the glory of God, a God who delivers, a God who is a God of strength, a God who is our song, a God who is our salvation. That's the kind of God who is described. And again, ain't nothing in here about what we did. Nothing. It's all about God. And again, I think we can learn lessons from this uh, in in the songs we sing today, in our worship of God today. How much of our worship, when we talk about praising God, is a praise of ourselves, you know. But anyway, that's my take on it. You may have another take, but the, the example here is one of the kind of worship that God deserves is the kind of worship that praises him for who he is and for what he has done. So this whole song is about God, what God has done, and who God is. The enemy boasted, "I will pursue." This is Pharaoh's army now. Pharaoh boasting, because remember, Pharaoh changed his mind. He let him get out of out of Dodge, but then he said, I'm not giving up the free labor, you know. And he had his army to and Pharaoh, I think, also was angry at himself for letting himself be outdone by God. Remember, they had the plagues and the contests to see whose gods were God was greater, and it got to the point where Pharaoh yielded. Why? Because of the death of the Egyptians' firstborn. That was it. They couldn't take any more after that. But once they let the Israelites go, Pharaoh is sitting in his dressed in his royal robes and sitting in his kingly chair, and he says, "Now they got to come back. Go get them. Go back." And you can imagine what would have happened if they had brought them back. And if they thought they had it hard the first time, you're talking about hard. They after all the Egyptians went through and lost for the sake of these slaves, when we get them back, they don't know what they didn't know what work was until we get them back here. And so here you have Pharaoh, who's angry with himself for letting them go, and 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 is boastful. The enemy boasted in verse 9. The enemy, meaning the Egyptians, boasted, I will pursue, I will overtake them, I will divide the spoils, I will gorge myself on them, I will draw my sword, and my hand will destroy them. That was Pharaoh's plan. See? But you blew your breath. This is verse 10. And the sea covered them. Covered. Drowned, covered. That's another great word. Covered. Like you go to bed and you cover yourself with a sheet. The sea covered them. You ever sleep uh, with under the covers, and even your head is under the covers. It's like you can picture this. You can picture this because it relates to our experiences. The sea covered them. They sank like lead. Now, before, what was it? They sank to the depths like a stone in verse 5. Here, another way of saying the same thing. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. And a piece of lead, the weight of it alone, you drop it in the water, it's gone. You won't see it anymore. But I'm going to stop here because there's so much more to this song that we will get to next time. But uh, the, the 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 two songs, the the song of Moses and the song of the Lamb, and so the song of Moses is this wonderful recital of their exuberation. See, because they've been liberated. They've been in slavery, the people, for 400 years. Their ancestors, including their ancestors, for 400 years. And God has heard their cry and has sent Moses to deliver them. And now they're out of bondage. First thing they do when they get to the other side of the Red Sea is sing. You don't see any singing like this before the 15th chapter of Exodus. Go through Genesis, all through Genesis, and through the first 14 chapters of Exodus. Not saying there was not music, because there was, but in terms of an organized song of the people sung to the glory of God, this is the first one. Exodus chapter 15, the song of Moses. God bless you tonight. This is so rich. Now, I just thought about it not long ago. One of the things that I really do miss is the interaction we used to have. We talk a lot today about what used to be, and questions that you raise, which stimulate our conversations, and um, because we learn through questions. Um, so, if you have a question that you would like me to address, you can call the church office. You can email the question to the church office. And if it's concerning the lesson in particular, um, I'll be happy to address those the next week, because they may be pertinent to our um, our study together. So you can do that. You can just the church office again is and we're grateful for our volunteers who are staffing the office Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, from 10 to 2. Someone is in the office, and if you cannot reach someone during those hours, you can call. I remember days when there was no you couldn't leave messages. Just phone just rang. But anyway, you can leave a message, um, or you can, even better, if you can send an email, send your question in an email, and um, they will find their way to me, and I'll be able to address them. God bless you tonight. Listen, we look forward to Sunday morning worship at 10 a.m. Um, our doors are open, and you have been walking through those doors in wonderful numbers, uh, but even more than the numbers is the sense of excitement and joy in being in the house in the house of the Lord. Now we are in the series of sermons, some things to remember, and we've been dealing with those things for the last few weeks. We have one more in the series on Sunday, and hope that you will join us in worship. And if not, uh, and let me say this one final thing: if you can, um, social media has made it too convenient for us, and by that I mean that if you can't join us in person, at least try to join us. um what is the phrase? In real time. Is that the phrase? um because it's not only easy not to go to church, for instance. It is easy not to worship when we worship at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings. I'll watch it sometime this week. Now sometimes you can't help it. It's just the way life is scheduled for you, and we understand that. But if you can, you know, God wants you to devote periods of time to Him, not just do it when you feel like it, uh, and 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 not make it important enough. 10 o'clock on Sunday morning is the time to join us for worship if you can. 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening is the time for you to join us for Bible study if you can. See, so that we have a sense of being together in real time, uh, and being in the presence of each other and in the presence of the Lord. I just want to say that to just help us and encourage us along the way, not to allow social media to make us become so lax until we just put it off because we can. Um, Makes sense? God bless you, and Sunday morning at 10 o'clock in the house of the Lord.